You're listening to Resonating with Emmet O'Malley. Hey everybody, you're welcome along to Resonating with Emmet O'Malley. I hope you're doing well, wherever you are, wherever you're listening to this. Nice to see and feel a bit of springtime blooming around the place. Things are a little less apocalyptic, I'm finding this week. A bit of sunshine, where I am anyway, and a bit of nature kicking into play again, which is a little opposite to the isolation, foreboding feeling that's been around for quite a while. So that's pretty nice. I appreciate you, nature. Thank you, nature. Please support this podcast by subscribing at patreon.com/Emmet O'Malley, where you will receive over 2.5 years of exclusive music and videos. It's the best way to support the show. Also, I have a weekly private podcast on Patreon, which is a lot of fun, so be sure to check that out. So it's patreon.com/Emmet O'Malley. That's EMMET O'Malley. Yes, I didn't have to spell the second half of my name. Just assume you're going to get that bit. You might do MALLY or leave out the O, or just kind of get it wrong on purpose. I couldn't find it. Find it. Sign up on Patreon. It's really good. There's loads of, well, it's good if you like what's there, I guess. But loads of music, loads of videos. It's all there. It's all there for the taking, for the listening, for the watching. Actor and comedian Phil Nichol is on the show today. I experienced Phil, that's how I can say it. I experienced him for the first time when I saw him performing on a show called The Lounge, I think it was called, on Irish TV years and years ago. I'd say this was 2000, something like that. And I was still in school, but it was one of these moments where I saw someone and it changed the molecules in me. His energy, this kind of out and out, like high speed verbal delivery, the physical comedy, the musical comedy. It's just like an explosion on stage. And I just remember at the time thinking, I want to do that. I need to do that. How do I do that? That is it. Because in the school at the time, at 17, trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, and all these ideas floating around, and for some reason you had to have all the answers, and there's a logical reason for that, because at 17, of course, your brain is fully developed at 17, and that's the best possible time. All the wisdom gained at that point, that's the best possible time to know exactly what to do for the rest of your life. So that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, I didn't have a clue, but seeing Phil on TV, yeah, it just lifted me up. It's these kind of performers, these kinds of artists. Other comedy people at the time in Ireland who did that for me were John Kenny and Pat Short, together called Dunbelievables. If you haven't heard of them, they were a big Irish act back in the 90s, but it's D''Unbelievables, Dunbelievables. Incredible stuff. It was just, well written, great characters. I loved anything that just raised things out of like the normal day-to-day kind of, oh, this is my life and blah, blah, blah. I just love, boom, like you're in a parallel universe. That's what I loved and I wanted to do. And that's kind of the way people like Phil, who I speak to on this episode, that's what they did to me. There's something about the way people laugh as well when they're watching Phil Nichol or comedy of the style that I'm talking about. I'd mentioned Unbelievables again, or I'd say the classic examples would be people like Robin Williams or Billy Connolly. It's kind of high energy, high speed thinking, rapid delivery, real stage presence, just capturing everybody in the palm of their hand while they're on stage. It's the kind of laughter though that's visceral. It's really just from the gut. It's physical. It doesn't go through some kind of intellectual process in the audience. It's just like straight, direct. That's a gift. Like that's just a great gift. And it's something that I was always just fascinated by. And when I started doing comedy about a year later, when I was 18, that's the kind of thing I chased. And I quickly realized it's the hardest kind of comedy to do, but still the only kind of comedy I wanted to do, the only thing I wanted to try. You literally live and die in the moment. And like comedy's like that anyway, but I think there's something about the tightrope walk of just that full explosion comedy. I guess it can always just go either way. That was my experience. It's probably not the same for other people, but it felt like always like high risk, high stakes. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, give the show a rating, as many stars as you can, and a review. That helps a lot. And press follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow me on all the social media places, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc., all at Emmet O'Malley Music. I don't do any dancing, or I don't even check TikTok, to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you. I have it because I was told it's something to have, but yeah, let's see. Just pop along, say hello anyway. Definitely on Instagram, Facebook, Emmet O'Malley Music. On YouTube as well, Emmet O'Malley Music. And I'll keep you updated on all the upcoming episodes. If you need to email the show and say hello as well, you can say hello at info@emmeto'malley.com. Anyway, I was delighted to have had a chance to talk to Phil on here. He's done some great things in his career, from Corky and the Juice Pigs in the early days to winning the prestigious Perrier Award. Well, it was called the IF Comedy Award at the time, in Edinburgh in 2006. At the moment, Phil is part of the cast of the musical Everybody's Talking About Jamie, which will hopefully be reopening at some stage later in the year in the West End when it's safe to do so. So keep an eye out for that. So here is my chat with the lovely, super talented Phil Nichol.
I'm a classic story of went to many different schools, moved many times, got bullied a lot, was too small for my age, had a lisp and a stutter, moved from Scotland to Canada, and then another 9 different schools before I could speak properly at age 11. And then at age 12 I saw a Shakespearean play and thought, that's what I want to do, which is completely insane for a kid that can't speak properly and that no one listens to. But I think it's a classic story. So that I kind of fell into the comedy while I was at acting school, and while I was growing up, I had an older brother, Andrew. I still have him, but he was a brilliant musician, just naturally gifted. He could pick up an instrument, and at the end of the night, play you a tune on it, and he could sing, and he was very, very clever. And so I really looked up to him, as you do big brothers. And when I was 8, my parents bought me a guitar for Christmas. Like a cheap old second-hand guitar, and my brother snatched it off me, and then learned how to play it, and then would play things. He's 6 years older than me, so he's like, 14. He'd play me a song and then hand it back to me, and I'd go, my fingers aren't big enough. So that's kind of how music started for me. We went to church. My parents are sort of devout, born-again Christians in the Brethren faith. I've written loads of material about it. I'm not. Hello. But of course, it meant that we were going to church 4 or 5 times a week, singing at all of it, and singing hymns and things. So music and stuff like that has always just been in part around me, and my brother always had loads of instruments in his room. But I've never thought of myself as being a musician, and it's just something that accompanied the performance, the acting bit of it. So when I fell into comedy, I went to university, and I met the other lads from my comedy act, which was called Corky and the Juice Pigs, which is like a Canadian comedy trio. Yeah. One of our things was to sit around and get smoke hashish off the stove and get high as cheaply as possible, and then get the guitars out and just make each other laugh. And we had a back room we stayed in a university house which had like 3 of us and 2 pot dealers who were ex-students, and they had a band called Daisy's Hot Butt Spots, which was like a punk band. And Daisy was one of their sheepdogs who had these skin growth on its behind and had shaved its backside. So Daisy's hot butt spots, and it was we went to university across the river from Detroit, so it was in the Jack White era of like punk. Detroit had an amazing punk music scene at that point, so right. I was all kind of caught up in that at university. That was the bands that were coming through the university were, we had a party at the Red Hot Chili Peppers, ended up on a couch, and the first I saw the Violent Femmes for the first time in with like 70 people, and so music for me, when I left home and moved away from going to church, I really got into punk music and two-tone music and ska and stuff, and so that kind of all melded together at university when I met the other two guys in a comedy music act, because I wasn't good enough to play music properly, but I loved playing really fast and really loud, and so that kind of became the style of Corky and the Juice Pigs. And when we left university, I went into a Shakespearean play, and on the Mondays, we had the Mondays off, we went down to the Yuck Yucks Comedy Club in Toronto to the amateur night, to the open spot night, and after the first one we did so well, they asked us to come back the next week, and after the second one we did so well, the third week they made us the headline act, the final amateur act, and on the fourth one, Mark Breslin from Yuck Yuck showed up and signed us, had a meeting with us the next day and gave us our first full feature spot, and within 2 years we were on the Dudley Moore Comedy Club special, which was on ABC television, hosted by Dudley Moore. So that was that. It was kind of all those things came together accidentally, really, and music. It was just always in there somehow. So
yeah. No, yeah. I hear you. And I was listening to some Corky and the Juice Pigs this morning, actually, getting myself ready for this. And yeah, man, I remember listening to those songs years ago. You used to play a couple of them live, just solo as well. A few standout ones, obviously Eskimo, but Dolphin Boy. I think that's my favorite. And I hadn't heard the Janitor. It's like a Neil Young, a chorus of Neil Young's, the song Janitor.
Yes.
It's incredible.
I think we got to a point. We love Neil Young. We've seen him all different times, and he's a Canadian folk legend. So. And it's also fun to do his voice. Hey Neil, how's it going, man? So we just and we just thought he always looked like there's always a creepy janitor in every school. I don't know what they call them in Britain, but there's he's the guy that lives down by the furnace. So we just thought we thought if Neil Young hadn't been the Canadian folk legend, he may have ended up being a janitor. And in a sense, he is a caretaker of our hearts, Emmet. Yeah. He is like he's an irresistible character, though. Not to do something about, though, Neil Young, because like he has that little bit of he's completely mental, it seems, as well as being like this amazing artist. Like I saw him a couple of years ago playing in Hyde Park. Yeah, in the thing, and I think it's just whatever mood you get him in, really, is the thing. But this, like at one point, he just started having a major strop, and there was a lot of people. He came out and did his acoustic set. He did like Heart of Gold and all the kind of Harvest kind of stuff. Yeah, did 3 or 4 or 5 songs. And people kind of wanted more of it, and he called the crowd a bunch of bastards, and he went into half an hour guitar solo. Crazy Horse. So he's just kind of like, "Fuck you guys." There was a concert in Hamilton, Ontario, which is where Greg Neal from the Juice Pigs lived, and he had on his Crazy Horse. They did a reunited Crazy Horse tour. Crazy Horse was when Neil Young was into really heavy rock. And they did a show. They had their support act was a Sonic Youth, you know, and I mean they're phenomenal. She's phenomenal, and they saw the crowd that go to see Neil Young in Canada tend to be old hippie dudes, like you know, like Easy Riders and stuff like that, and people that are kind of into flower power and you know like into into Earth rights and things, and so Sonic Youth wasn't doing it for them at all, and they were getting booed, and the people were throwing like, you know, Hamilton's kind of like where probably AC/DC would rock the place out, right? But Sonic Youth, no. So they were throwing stuff and yelling at them. So Sonic Youth just, I've got about 4 or 5 songs in, just went, no, it's fuck this, man. And the guy just swearing at them, going, "Fuck you, fuck your mother." And then they turned around, just started doing that very thing. They just started playing like really loud, grungy guitar solos, and just like a Sonic Youth meth. And then instead of finishing, what they did is they got the feedback going on all their guitars, and they put their guitars on top of the amplifiers and turned everything up. You could see them turn everything up till full on all the squelch and reverb, delay, chorus, everything. Put their guitars on top while the drummer just like smacking and kicking the drums over, and then left. So the room was like people were holding their ears, screaming "nah," and they walked off and the sound guy running. You could see a sound guy running to the main desk to get the sound down, because obviously they had their own mixing guys who pushed all the levels straight up. This is like a hockey stadium, so it was like really echoey, and it was unbelievable. And then the sound came down. The crowd was like silenced. They were so deafened, they were silent. And then they started booing. And then Neil Young came out and just went, "Hey guys, they're friends of mine. I've been on tour with them." So and did a really short set.
Oh God! And kind of went, I just fuck you. Just the contrast of that, like, you know, the feedback and the noise and the basically like we're not here for you, basically, and then Neil Young quietly coming out, making a little statement. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I once had that with I had a similar experience, much smaller level. I was with Rod Gilbert, who's quite a well-known Welsh comic, and we were doing Edinburgh warm-ups at the Monkey Barrel, not the Monkey Barrel, the what's it called? The Monkey Club. It's in a place in Camden. So I'd gone on with my new act called Bobby Spade, which was a beat poet, a really misogynistic, horrible beat poet in a white suit. And the show was, he was a ghost and he was in purgatory, and he was forced to speak all of the poems about his mother that he had written throughout his life. And he had a little jazz band with us. And I went on, and this audience were there to see. The place was packed with people to see Rod Gilbert just as his career was taking off. And of course, they hated me. They didn't get it. They didn't understand it. It was artsy, and at any time I could have changed gear and done my regular act and gone into it and won them over. But it wasn't what I was there for. And I had a band with me, and we were trying to rehearse these songs for the Edinburgh Festival. So they pretty much booed me off, and I pretty much had the same experience. I didn't blast them with feedback, but I told them where they can stick their, show. And then Rod went on and just went, I was backstage, I was in tears, I was that upset about it. And the band were going, "It's okay, Phil, don't worry about it." I was like, "Yeah, but this is bullshit, you know." And then Rod went on and said to them, he just went, "You guys are, I know you're here to see me, but you guys are idiots." And he said that's one of the best comedians that I know, and he's a friend of mine, and you booed him off, and I think you're insulting, and you're rude, and you're insane. And then he continued. I left at that point. I couldn't be in the room. I snuck out through the kitchen. It's embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. I mean, that's after that was in 2009. So I mean, that's after I had been nominated and won the Perret and all that stuff. So the fact it can still happen to you is exceptional.
Yeah, that's the thing that I remember so clearly about when I was doing stand-up. It's like night and day, like one gig after the next, like the day after. I remember I had like probably my best ever gig one night, where it was like one of those ones where I could see the crowd kind of swaying, like, with laughter, and a huge crowd, really lucky night with the lineup. and I was like, yes, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, you know. And the next day was like the exact same set, and people just literally waiting for me to get off, you know,
Right.
just sitting. Like it was like it's a obviously that's the learning process with the whole thing as well. But one thing that came up there when you were chatting about that was a piece of advice someone gave me kind of like at the start of that whole journey as well was another comedian just came up to me after a gig and said, I think you're doing it for them, like as in the audience, you're trying too hard. It's like you need to do it for you. And this kind of thing, which was a really interesting little adjustment for me mentally. But then it's like, because I was also trying to get laughs. It's a funny balance, isn't it?
Well, I actually completely feel the other way about that. I'm you know, I do some mentoring for younger comics, and I direct people and stuff now, and I don't think of myself as being good at that. Just to caveat it, I'm not. It's something that I do because I feel it as an older performer. Some of the things that older people have said to me, like that guy saying to you, he's trying to help you get through whatever problems he saw you were having. But I think his advice was wrong, and I would say there are really, to generalize, two types of comedians, and there's the comedian, and we kind of, you know, vacillate between the two. There's the comedians who are up on stage for themselves, and it's about them. It's all about you are there gathered to look at me. And then there's the comedians and the performers, and I try to keep myself on this side of it, are the comedians that are there on stage for the audience, for you. I want to entertain you, and I'm there to, you know, educate or entertain or enlighten or inspire the audience. And so you've got this incredible ego working, you've got this incredible narcissism that most performers and comedians, it's distilled into one person because you can't share it with your drummer. If you start to think they're here, they're only here because of me, it's a really, really short and rough road to go down. Whereas the idea that you're there to for them, and that you should be humbled, and you know, you see sort of this sort of I want to call it elitism, but you want, you know, people that are high functioning in the arts world, always see them doing speeches always saying, I'm so humbled by everything. And I used to mock them and go, yeah, humbled, yeah, right, you know, you're Al Pacino or whatever. But then you realize, no, I think if you're really in tune with what you're supposed to be doing as an artist, you should be constantly aware of the fact that you're doing it for the audience. Now, that doesn't mean that the creative side of it doesn't have to solely come out of you and be that it's, you know, you're not trying to second guess what they want. You have to give them what you are, if that makes sense. You've got to bare yourself to them and be as open and honest, especially as comedians, whether you're doing something surreal or something very heartfelt and true. It still has to come from you, and it has to feel really honest, or the audience sense it. But I would say that the best thing you could do as a comedian is to always remember to respect the audience, and that you're there for them first. So if you're not having a good set and you are starting to bomb, the worst thing you can do is turn on them and go, fuck you, I'm better than you, do you know how much money I make? I just think it's appalling to do that. It's not fun to watch.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree with you more there, you know. And it never sat with me, the idea of, like, as in like, the most important thing about this is me and, like, kind of my little world, let's say. But I think maybe what I got out of it was, it also seems like you touched on there as well, problematic to get into a habit of kind of people pleasing with an audience as well, because like that kind of thing. Like, I'm there primarily to give and to entertain and to to do my bit. Like that's how I feel about music as well. Like I'm bringing what I'm bringing, and I'm going to put on a good show, let's say.
Well,
but if I sacrifice my stuff completely, I'm just kind of, I don't have anything.
Well, I'm open to this conversation because because I think it's, I go back and forth between it. But if to use music as an analogy, I think you have to separate the forms as well, because if you watch some Charles Bukowski, there's some go on YouTube and put up Charles Bukowski live, and there's like 35-minute, 40-minute long video filmed Super 8 films of him. And he just despised the audience, or pretended to, and drink wine and get drunk and offer people out for fights and stuff. And the place would be packed, rammed with hecklers, and he's the funniest heckler put down person that I've ever seen. He's better than any comedian I've ever seen, because he did not give a shit, and he acted like he didn't give a shit. And if he wanted to sit there and drink a bottle of wine and smoke cigarettes and not say anything, he would. And it's inspiring to watch that. But then again, he wrote poems. And he write poems late at night, I'm assuming, or whenever he wrote them, you imagine late at night, drunk after a punch up, and that's what he was presenting. Comedians, on the other hand, or musicians, on the other hand, for the most part, are trying to lighten the load of the audience, and I don't like comedy as a gladiator sport, but some comedians, that's where they come from. At the same time, I love provoking an audience, and I don't shy away from hecklers, but I try and keep in my mind that I'm there for the audience. The audience has made my life feel like a charmed life, because they keep showing up to see this comedy, and not me particularly, but they see any comedy. They just like to go out and see comedy, and we should remember their part in it. And respect them for it. That said, you can get in front of like a group of 100 squatties who are total jerks and trying to destroy you and throw you off and do all that stuff. But that's kind of fun, you have to imagine what it would be like to be them,
Yeah. It might be something that it might be part of what I was touching on at the start when I first saw you, when I mentioned the inspiration, because it was like I saw you gave so much basically on stage, and still do. But I mean, when in that moment, that gave so much in terms of energy, commitment, and full on entertainment. I think that was maybe the distinction. It stood out basically. It stood out compared to. What I meant by the kind of clever thing was kind of maybe a bit like the facade of cleverness. It's a very easy character to play.
Yes. The Juice Pigs, the Corky and the Juice Pigs, and the sense of humor we developed there was a small group of us. There was more than just the three of us. There was about 7 or 8 guys and girls who all hung out together at the School of Dramatic Art, and we used to play improv games with each other, even if we were in the pub, just messing about. I think most comedians and most sketch troupes and stuff probably have a similar story, where you find people that you kind of second guess where they're going with stuff. And what we were trying to constantly do is surprise each other and make each other laugh. So therefore the boundaries of taste were pushed, and the boundaries of words were pushed, and our boundaries of our literary sense were pushed, and we try to surprise each other in all different ways and play. We didn't think of this at the time. It's not like we sat down right, let's play a game. It's just I realized now we used to just sit and talk rubbish and talk nonsense, and sometimes some really wonderfully warped and weird ideas would come out of it. We also were in an era when audiences enjoyed being pushed and provoked. I think that's one of the big changes that's happened over the last 10 years, 15 years, as audiences are now, as it's become more mainstream, we're now having much more careful of what we say and do, because the audiences are revolting. But when I was started doing comedy, Doug Stanhope is one of the purveyors of it. It would just push an audience to its limit, and that includes his own audience. So once you started developing that, it really, became a shock and awe tactic to try and provoke an audience. So you had to be clever in a different way. You had to be clever in a way. You can't just be rude. You can't just be offensive. You had to be clever, and there had to be a twisted target. So to use the Only Gay Eskimo or the Eskimo song as an example, it made us laugh because it was wrong it was very wrong on so many levels that you had to accept that we knew that, and therefore that's where the humor came from, is that we were being so wrong that it was right. Or in Britain there would be things like Bottom was like that from that era, where it's wrong, and they say but they go down that fine line and they never quite tip over into absolute offensiveness, because it's so offensive that you just accept that it's done for fun. The League of Gentlemen were probably on the last cusp of that sense of humor, and even they're being pulled up now, with the modern world on what was offensive, what's actually offensive, and things that are offensive. But they were purposely being offensive because with knowing that we're smart enough to know that they knew what they were doing, and therefore it made it funny and acceptable. That's the theory anyway.
Yeah, I get you. But I think so much to do with intention as well, and that context gets lost so easily. Like, as in, when you see that stuff, like the Eskimo song or whatever, you kind of know the intention is fun and it's good, and it's open to interpretation. But we are living in an age, for example, as well, where just on the BBC iPlayer the last day, or the news player actually, I played a video and it had a warning on it saying this video has offensive scenes in it. And it's like they've all actually, it didn't say that some viewers may find this offensive. They've already decided my reaction, I think it's too blurry at the moment, I think.
I mean, it is a huge topic. I wonder if by telling people that it's offensive, if that doesn't actually make it offensive. By saying that it's offensive, then you're admitting it's offensive. Then why are you showing it? And then so you're kind of you've got your foot in two camps there. You're saying that it's okay to offend you, but we have to warn you that we're going to do it first. And you have the choice. I guess what they're trying to do is remove the ability for people to complain after the fact, which is, to me, that's even more, that's disgusting. That's like saying, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, and if you don't want to watch it, turn away now, so you can't complain about it later. Well, we did tell you, and I think
we told you so.
We told you it was going to be offensive. Well, I don't know. It's a bit different than going back through cultural catalog and saying we can't. There's Shylock in Shakespeare's famous play is an offense to Jewish people without considering the time and place. But I'm not Jewish, so it's hard. It would be hard for me to have that discussion with someone who is. Because I'm not going to deny that their feelings about it. However, they may just be one person. It's that we're in that world where you might find the Jewish actors who have played the part, and I'm thinking Al Pacino or someone like that. And is he Jewish? I don't know. Anyway, so you might, I don't know. It's something that I've come to deal with. I've listened back to the back catalog of stuff. There's so many things that I could be cancelled for. I have an album called Late Night Electric Watermelon, which is about 22 tracks of comedy that I wrote once I went from when I left the Juice Pigs up until I think I put it out in 2011. And it's got a whole lot of music on it, and it was really cheap, and it was done really cheaply, and we did it over a couple of days. And it's not the most groundbreaking musical comedy album of all time, but there are a few gems on it that I'm really proud of. But most of it is stuff. I listen to it now and thinking, oh, I use the word midget for one that on a couple of tracks that could get me canceled because you're not you know that's not a term. I want to say you're not allowed to say that anymore, but that's even that makes it sound like I'm being I don't care. I do. I just that at the time that wasn't forefront in my mind. I do a song about Rohypnol, which came out of a show that I did with an ex-girlfriend of mine, and the audience. I jokingly said to the audience, I can write a comedy song about anything. It was defending something I'd said, and someone at the back, as a joke, yelled out Rohypnol, right? And the whole audience laughed at this. Because that is basically challenging me to make funny one of the most delicate topics. Yeah. But Rohypnol itself, as an object, as a thing, is inoffensive, right? Right? You know what I mean? But what it conjures, the image it conjures is of a horrific situation, which I wouldn't wish on anybody. But had to take. I'm standing on stage. I've challenged them. Now they've challenged me. So I improvised a song while I was doing it. Improvised a song where both parties in the scenario actually liked Rohypnol, loved Rohypnol, like it was a kind of thing they wanted to take, and they enjoyed each other's company. And as an alternative lifestyle, I call it an alternative lifestyle love story. It was just a joke. It really was just me sort of I'm trying to get out of this really bad situation I put myself in. And it became funny to me. And that's the history of that song. And its defense, you can defend it in any number of ways. But I would completely understand if someone said, that really hurt me, that really hurts me, you don't understand. And I have had people say, you don't understand what that means. And my answer is, no, I really understand what that means, which is why I wrote it and why it's funny to me and why it might be funny to someone. It is not making fun of victims. You know, it is not it is purely a comment on it actually is a comment on offensiveness and the fact that there's nothing in that song that's actually offensive.
Yeah. How does all this this current environment, how does it affect you, like writing now, or just going back into comedy, let's say looking at live comedy after all these lockdowns are over and stuff, like is that there kind of sitting on your shoulder, like whispering in your ear?
Well, we're going back to, this comes lovely background to our original topic, or whatever. We don't really have topics, but we were talking about caring about the audience and respecting them. So yes, I mean, I think it's wrong to stick to your guns and say, I'm not changing the way I think. Yeah. I'm not going to change my attitude towards what comedy is because of some, millennial. And I think, no, you have to listen to what people are doing, and it's called the state of the art. And you have to accept that these are considerations. Now, if you want to if you want to attack that subject, Steve Hughes does it brilliantly. If you want to take on the subject of offensiveness and what it means, and censorship and canceling and all these things, and then you have to be very clever about it. And you have to be prepared for some people to just not understand, because some people have different levels of understanding and different levels of empathy for you as a performer. And then other people want you to be ruthless and have, they're kind of being touted as, right-wing thinkers or libertarians, and on what's offensive. So you've got this really weird schism in the comedy industry where you've got, I'm trying to think, someone like Titania McGrath, which the guy that wrote that, he was writing it as a comment on woke behavior, but people that were genuinely woke hate it. But the more that happened, the more it consolidated his audience, which is people that hated the woke. And then I don't think that's why he started. I don't know him, Andrew Doyle. He's a young. I don't know how young, if he's young, but he's a young gay comic. He's he now runs a night called Unleashed in which I've never done in Bethnal Green, and people have said to me, "You should do Unleashed." I'm like, "Well, it's not really. That puts me in a funny category because if I do that show, I'm then saying I think that I agree with that."
Yes,
that you should be saying do
I'm
whatever you
aligning
want.
myself with
you should be Count Dankula and have your Nazi pug, which I don't I don't think that's fun. I didn't think it was funny. Yeah. I don't think that he should go to prison or for it. But there has to be some kind of commonality in our understanding of what things can and can't be said in a public forum. And I don't mean censorship. I just mean it needs to be open to discussion. I need to accept that there are people who would be absolutely 100% offended by it, misunderstand it, and not be able to look at other angles of the situation, of that particular situation. If you're using Count Dankula and his pug. So I accept that it's a vast subject, and I'm sort of in the middle of it. I have. In Canada, you do not use the term Eskimo. It's absolutely horrendous. It's like the N-word. But at the time that we wrote the song, and we were watching a TV show, an Australian nature show, an Australian program, where it was an Australian voiceover doing a study of Native Canadians, Inuit, who going off on the seal hunt for months at a time. You go off in pairs, and he was calling on the SBS, which is like the PBS of Australia. He was calling them Eskimos. That made us laugh. That made it like, oh my God, that's just like they're not even wasn't even. You can understand why. No one had corrected it at that point. So that made us laugh. And then we started just laughing about our tour manager at the time, James is gay and, has been a friend of ours from university days. And we just thought it'd be really funny. James would love that, going off and being, and then we just following the connection. Wow, there has to be, some gay community in Inuit community. There's not that many of them. You might be the only gay in that tribe. And then that really made us howl to think of the guys going, no, I'm not going, I don't want to go with him. It's just, it's not, I don't see that as being an offense either to the Inuit community or to the homosexual LGBT community, so LGBTQ community. So I don't, but I can understand why someone that doesn't listen to it closely or doesn't know me or know the work might on the surface go, that really offends me. So if you saw the words, the only gay Eskimo, you might go, that's really offensive. In the end, the song, I believe the reason the song has been so popular with comedy crowds, and it was on Dr. Demento and has appeared and featured on all sorts of different places, and we've just actually been asked to put it into the British Library, special recordings of heritage recordings. The reason for that, I think, is because it actually is about deep loneliness and being excluded. And it actually touches people from the LGBT community and people of Inuit heritage, because there's an understanding, and it's sort of like, that's probably the loneliest place you could be. And that's what it's, and in the end, we didn't sit down and go, let's write the loneliest song you could write. We wrote it with dumb song with ice puns,
Right.
But we stumbled across something that actually touches people on that level. And I don't want to get too, well, that's what we were trying to do. We completely accidental comedy. Comedy is lovely for that. Accidentally pointing out the foibles of the human existence, to not get too highfalutin about it. But that is really what comedy does. It makes you look at reality from the most obtuse angles.
Yeah, and like the heart comes through, really, as in like what starts as like a funny idea, funny song, but then it automatically has that that side to it, you know. I was going to ask you that. At what point did you move to London? Did you move straight from Canada to London, and did you come on your own, or did you come with a band? And and also, like, what was the comedy scene like back then?
Well, the comedy scene in Britain it still is to a certain extent, but there was a period, they call it a boom period, but it was Up the Creek and the Comedy Store and the Glee clubs were, and Jongleurs only had one club, and it was, you knew every single comedian. It was Sean Hughes and Kevin Day and Michael Redmond, and it was the stand was still brand new. Can you imagine? The Stand, which is now an established brand, was just a brand new thing. I remember when it moved to the first to where the original Edinburgh one is from the nightclub or wherever they were. So. It was extraordinary. We were traveling all over the world. Australia, things were taking off there. There was some big TV shows, and I'd been doing comedy with the Juice Pigs for about 10 years at that point, and we were on development deals with Disney. We'd been on Mad TV on the Fox network for a season and a half doing our songs. We were having meetings with Hollywood producers. We were at the same agents as Jim Carrey, blah blah blah, and I was married to an Australian woman, and my marriage kind of fell apart because I was never there. I was always somewhere else, and at the time I was very upset by what had happened, and in time I've come to realize that it was 50% my fault as well for just not being available. So I moved to run away from that situation in Toronto where we lived. I moved to Britain because I was born in Cumbernauld, Scotland, and so I have a British passport, and I moved to London in 1997, 98, but we'd been coming back and forth since 1990. I did the Edinburgh Festival for 1990, I think it was. I've actually lost track of whether it was 90 or 91, but it's not unimportant, really. It's So I had sort of things set up here, but about a month after my marriage completely bottomed out, the Corky the Juice Pigs fell apart, and which is a whole other story, and it was kind of acrimonious, and it wasn't very fun. So within the space in 1996, I started doing my own solo shows, and that very same year, my whole life changed drastically. Wow. So I lost all of the connections to Hollywood. I lost my 7 closest friends were all suddenly estranged from me, and I moved to Britain. I got rid of everything that I had. I moved to Britain with a guitar, a bag of papers that had sort of documents, and one bag of clothes, and that was it. And wow. I moved into I was sort of like in an attic squat flat, and that was it. And so that was going from we had, at the height of our Juice Pigs success, we had auditioned for Steven Spielberg, and then I went back. And so the comedy career I'm on now is like I call it my second comedy career. I've had 2 comedy careers, and then I kind of rebuilt. By 1998, I had sort of, through my friend Lisa White, who's glorious talent, and she took great care to help me, and I bounced back in 1998. I won the Time Out Comedy Award, along with Adam Bloom that year. So, and that was kind of the beginning where I realized I can probably do this by myself, maybe by myself. But I never really wanted to be a stand-up comedian.
Okay.
I was in the group. I was in the group for the sketches and for the acting, and and the music was not something that I really had. It's just been put upon me. So
What was it about the stand-up that kind of didn't appeal to you? Is it the conversational, being oneself, let's say, on stage, or the persona of like chatting to the audience like in a normal way? Is it something around that? 'Cause
No,
it's something
I just didn't. I just didn't think I was very funny. I'm not really. I mean, you know, well, I don't. You've caught me out on that. I don't say this very often, but I've never really wanted to be a stand-up comedian at all. And so I think there's a large part of me still doesn't. But I'm kind of stuck in a lifestyle, a loop of like, this is what I do. This is what I do, and this is what I'm known for. And you know, I've done okay, and you know, I have a lifestyle. But it's not where I ever expected. When I was a teenager, teenage Phil Nichol would not have ever pegged me to grow up to be a stand-up comedian. And I just don't, I see there's so many brilliantly funny, naturally funny human beings that I know through stand-up, and I don't feel like I'm one of them.
Just a reminder, patreon.com/Emmet O'Malley, EMMETOMALLEY. Go on there now, you'll get a few bits and pieces. I was going to say free bits, but they're not free. It's about $5, but it's worth it. There's videos, there's songs, plenty of songs, all kinds of stuff. Patreon.com/Emmet O'Malley. Get on there. Good stuff.
Like, is there part of you that also loves it like nothing else? You know?
No, well, see, that's a discussion, because there's obviously a bit of me that loves the sound of my own voice, right? And as I suggested earlier in the podcast, I have, you know, the way I was brought up, as with everybody, has had a huge effect on the person I became, and not being able to speak or listen to, and being bullied and beaten up and stuff for so long, and being from a different country, and all the stuff that goes along with being an immigrant and everything like that, has given me a very stubborn attitude. It could be that I'm just a stubborn person, but I'm also, had a dream of being a live stage performer, and it might not be exactly what I was hoping to do. Like, you know, to be really honest, I would love to have played some of the great Shakespearean roles on stage at the Globe or at the RSC, and I find that when I go and see those shows, I just think these actors are phenomenal. And but you know, I've learned a lot of skills, and I really love comedy. I love watching other people do it, and I just. It's a sort of it's allowed me to have a lifestyle, a sort of a bohemian kind of artistic, an arts lifestyle, which is part of the reason I liked the thought of being an actor and the thought of working for theater companies and stuff. I do love art. I love creating things, and I love other people that do it, and I love going to galleries, and I think it's vital. I'm actually a really kind of hardcore when it comes to arts funding and trying to get more people to play instruments and more people to create art, and not be so critical of stuff. And I'm not a fan of critics, and I'm not a fan of people that try to berate and make other people feel bad about a piece of art being shit. Or, you know, you hear it all the time, going, "The fuck, that album sucks." I'm like, well, no, it doesn't. It's great. It's just not for you, you know.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
people like you know, great artists that inspire me to be more adventurous. So, I mean, I don't get me wrong. If I'm invited to a comedy festival, I go and I love it and I have fun, and I love watching really great comics. I think this is probably true for a lot of comedians. Sometimes you just feel like a bit of a ligger, and you know, I feel like I'm I've got away with it for this long, and at any point people are going to realize that I'm just faking it. And I know that what you perceive, and very kindly have expressed, and I appreciate that, but maybe the idea is not to focus so much on what people think and what people think about me, and just get on with creating stuff. And if I think something's funny at this point, I've got enough of a track record to think maybe it's funny, and,
Yeah.
and put it out. And with comedy, it's lovely because you get an immediate response. Is it funny? They laugh. It's funny. That's it. This is really quite clear cut. Now, whether it's clever or offensive or it needs work, that's not anyone's. That's no one's business but the comedians. They
Right.
laughed. They laughed. I repeat ad infinitum.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Maybe I'll be bold enough to ask, like, in terms of, you mentioned like Shakespearean acting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's a. Would that be something that you would move towards? Generally, considering it's such a, like, as in that's something that seems to really resonate, like a real passion.
I feel like I've been gearing up for it. I started a theater company. I think we're in almost our 17th year, believe it or not. What, 2003?
Wow.
So about 17 years, with a young woman. Well, we're no longer young, but at the time, Maggie Inchley is her name, and we met through friends of friends going to see a play at the National Theatre, and she was taking her MA in direction at Mount View Theatre School, and asked me if I had some time to be an actor in her in her project at the end of the year. So sort of like a freebie, and I hadn't really done any acting. We're talking about acting, and told her most people didn't realize that was my background, that I trained as an actor, and I had done 12 Angry Men, and people had seen me do some acting and said, oh, he's actually not, it's just from being trained. I think I have few little tricks and skills and things. So I did that, and I did a thing with her in Edinburgh, and it went really well. So we just continued with the Comedians Theatre Company, and putting comedians. I thought, well, this is something I want to do, and maybe I can help other comedians who've never done any acting or have done acting and there's no outlet for it. So I started putting on theater pieces and things, and casting myself in good roles, and then also putting other people. Tony Law played Killer Joe in Tracy Lett's amazing play, and throughout the years we've had new material nights, Itch a Scratch events. We've had people like Ed Byrne, Jack Whitehall, Steve Frost, Helen Lederer, Sarah Pascoe was a regular member of the company, and then on stage we've had Bridget Christie and Lionel Blair. Even we've had, so I've had my. That's enough to keep me theatrical. Even today, this afternoon, when this podcast goes out, it won't be, but the afternoon we're recording this, I'm doing a play reading of a new play written by two stand-up comedians, Paul Ricketts and Steve Griven. It's a comic play based around the life of Lizzie McGee, who was the woman who invented the board game Monopoly, only to have it stolen from her. And it's a comic sort of bio-comedy, and we've got Nick Helm and Jen Brister and Tom Stade, Alison June Smith, Rhea Lena, and David Mills in the cast, and we're all just getting together to do a rehearsed reading. We're doing a rehearsed reading on Zoom for the public next week, and so we're rehearsing it. So I'm not in it, I'm just producing it. I'm helping, well, I'm not helping, I'm the one putting it together with Maggie to help Steve and Paul write a play, and I just it may come to fruition where we get to perform it on stage at some point. I mean, that is the goal.
That's awesome, man. No, it's great to hear that. No, I'm really glad to hear that side of your career. Going on and on.
I don't know. Sometimes, I hear the tone of my voice sometimes, and I get really strident about things. And when I listen to it back, I'll listen back to this podcast. If I listen to it, and I'll go, "Oh God, shut up, Phil! You sound really." But I think it's important to have that confidence. And I'm this weird mix of like completely unconfident, and I think I've psychologically learned to deal with that. by overcompensating, going, right, we're going to do this today. and then I get things done. And maybe I've actually started thinking, I've been watching Kanye West and the run up into the elections last year, and I thought he's bipolar and he gets these rushes of creativity, and I thought maybe I have symptoms of of some deeper condition that causes me to be like that. I do not know, but I get waves of creativity where I go, I have to get this done, and then there's days where I can't get out of bed.
Yeah, no, I totally relate, man, and I don't know, there's some kind of dance that happens between the fear of like nothing happening and the kind of having to do it all in 1 week. Something like that comes up a lot, for me. But there's something about the doing, the action, I think, that is just the thing as well, because I've had times where I do stuff for a while quite intensely, and then I drop off for quite a few months, and then I feed into all the self-doubt and the rest of it. I'm trying to learn at the moment to just keep it going, just keep that action up, because that does feed it's just the physical, actual reminder in reality. Oh, I am doing things, I am growing with this. It is evolving.
It will get better. Well, it's a skill. So it's sort of art, being this esoteric thing. There's hard when you're young and you don't have, you want to do something. Sometimes people are naturally gifted and they just come up with these amazing paintings or brilliant songs, and they don't know how they've done it. And then when they're asked to do it professionally, it all falls apart because they don't know what it is they've done, because they haven't had time to look at their own method and find their way around those things. And then there's if there's any young listeners, the thing is to just keep repeating. Don't let anyone dent your confidence. Don't let anything dent your confidence, and don't be a hard critic on yourself. You're going to face enough hard critics anyway. So just keep the process going. And so if you're playing songs, just pick up the guitar and play every day and do it for the love of doing it, which is going back to the same conversation we began with, which is what the comedian was trying to tell you at the beginning. His advice was trying to tell you, keep doing it for you, because that's the person that has to be satisfied with it. Of course, what I took umbrage with is that it should be remembering that if you're doing it for you, but there is an audience, and that art isn't art if it sits in a room by itself. It's not. It has to be shared. I do believe that art is coming under attack because it questions authority and it questions power, and it does it in a way. It does it in a way they can't close it down. So you can't look at a Jackson Pollock and say, well, we can't have that, because there's nothing to not have. But if you know the history and the background, and you look at the anger and it's a symptom of what he felt was a cancerous society. I think. That's just, what do I know? I'm not. But I think we need to be building people up. Less critics would be good. But of course, it's part of the state of the art nature of the game. You have to play that game as well. But as artists, when I hear artists being critical of other artists, I don't have time for them.
Yeah, no, I feel the exact same way. It's a real turn off, and at the same time, like when I'm trying to make something myself, if I'm trying to work on like a song or even just keep playing, keep singing, keep rehearsing, all this kind of stuff. Like it's not going to help me in any sense to have somebody ripping it to shreds, like somebody who has doesn't really affect my life in any sense outside of that. It doesn't do anything for me, No. It's and it often is coming from people who have never really gone through the experience of doing that daily grind as well that we talked about. Like, as in everything has to be intellectualized, everything has to be kind of, over thought about almost, about someone else's work. Whereas an artist is just someone who has has to keep trying to put out what's in their heart, let's say, and what's in their heads and their ideas, and just put it into a form that resonates with people, I guess. And if it does or not, that's who knows. But it just doesn't help to have people pulling you down at any point.
No, I always use an analogy for the people that I work with, that creativity is like a tap, and you have the control of that tap, and the more that you write and the more that you express, then you are turning the tap on. You're the one that if you sit down and go, I'm going to play the guitar for an hour today. It's 2:00. I'm going to play until 3. That's turning the tap on. And the more you turn the tap on, the bigger the more that comes out. And if critics touch your hand and force you to turn the tap down, because you go, so I don't know what that's to, and then you turn the tap off, you'll end up just turning it off completely. So the best thing to do is to open it up and get as much. The more creative you can be, the more creative you become, etc. And it feeds itself. And I think of our great musical artists like Prince, who would have surrounded himself with all other musicians, and he lived in a place where it was just musical instruments and had regular concerts. He had a nightclub in his complex, and he would invite audiences to come and listen to him jam and play nightly. And it was just a tap that he couldn't turn off. Now, whether that's because he was driven, whether it's, who knows the mind of the person, what drove that and where it comes from is beyond me. But I do think that that type of mentality, even if you've only got a small audience of friends and family at the end of your life who have listened to your songs, it's still, the songs have done something for you, and that tap has been on. So just keep that. I just like that. I just have an image of it being, you have to keep that tap running. Yeah. Because if you turn it off, it'll close itself off and it'll rust up and
right.
And I think that happens to a lot of people when they're young. I think it happens to a lot of artists, and I think that it's a shame. In fact, it's not even a shame. It's disgusting that they don't have music programs. They'll have math programs, but not music programs. That's completely wrong to me. So I'm sorry. Whatever you think, the conservatives or the capitalists that run our society who think that numbers are more important than music are wrong. Absolutely 100% wrong. They'd rather have people go in any kind of creative space. Elon Musk is rich because he's creative, not because he's good at numbers. Although he might be good at numbers, but as well. Yeah. But what I'm saying is he's got a creative mind and a creative energy, and I bet he's surrounded by people that sit down and come up with really great creative ideas and problem solving. And the methods of teaching people, taking away. I was very lucky, and I went to a high school that had a theater teacher who took me aside and we would put on plays and take them to the Sears Drama Festival. All that stuff needs to be supported by the society, because if it's art will be the thing that solves a lot of social ills. And you can call me crazy, but I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, me too. And it's like the opposite of crazy for me. Like, it's crazy the way things actually, like the way the attitudes towards creativity and art are. And I just think that one of the things that's really lacking is a lack of, let's say, space, the prioritizing of space in people's lives, where people can have an opportunity to this is, like you mentioned, like, this is my hour to create. This is my like it's not instilled, I think, in society, in people, to honor this, like, just times where you're kind of sitting with yourself, where you're allowing stuff to come in. You're giving, like it's important to write this stuff down. It's important to work on ideas that aren't that can't be predicted or they can't be controlled.
Yeah.
There's no emphasis on that at all.
No, it gets into a really kind of deep, weird place, but you know, what ancient man was doing when they were drawing on walls, and was vital to the survival of the tribe. It wasn't just, they weren't just going, hey, look, we're going to draw some cartoons on the walls. Hey, kids, look. They were teaching their children how to hunt, and telling stories to the people and in the cave of what had happened, and putting their hands on the walls. They weren't putting their hands on the walls thinking in 2,000 years people are going to look at this and remember us. They were doing it then, probably the same way that we put marks on the walls to measure the height of children as they grow up. So just see that. Look, next year you put your hand up there. Go, look, your hand's grown, and simple. It's really basic human need to express yourself artistically. It's what sets us aside from other animals who don't create art. So why wouldn't we be focused on experimenting and discovering and allowing people to discover why that we have that need and letting it happen? It seems insane that they would be thinking it's just some kind of weird thing that, you know, people play the guitar. It's like it's not just it's an understanding of science, and I, you know, I mean, I'm getting kind of deeply philosophical about it, but I genuinely believe it's a mistake not to teach every single child to play some form of instrument. Some may be better than others, but you know as a musician, and I know as a musician, the number of times where it's been a balm to my aching heart. So you would, if that's true on a personal level, what would it mean on a societal level?
Yeah,
that's just a theory. But I mean, you know, I probably this podcast is probably going out to other artists and stuff, so people go, well, that's just obvious, and they agree. But I think it's something that we need to constantly fight for, because as art has taught us, the powerful and power-hungry people don't want us to learn about ourselves, because they don't want us to have our individual minds. It doesn't work. They can't enslave us if we're thinking for ourselves artistically.
Yeah, and it is a healing thing as well, for sure. Like, I remember growing up, like, as a teenager, when I started writing songs, I remember that was like the greatest therapeutic thing for me at the time, just doing that. Like also this process by which I could see, oh, I've just made something, as well as being able to say how I feel in this moment and express it. Like, I've done something that I really value, and that came from within me, you know. And like, I often thought, like, this came up in a previous episode of the podcast as well. I often thought about this idea, if there was, like, hypothetically some kind of like extraterrestrial kind of being looking down over humanity, and they saw this like music festival, and they saw all these people just gathering in this kind of this just mass of like people around these boxes that are creating vibrations, you know. Like, it's literally a bunch of people going to get like healed from the stress of their life, because we call it music, we call it festivals, we call it like entertainment. But really, we're getting something very deeply important to who we are as human beings from all that.
Well, the logical extension of that analogy would be that any extraterrestrial that's capable of recognizing us as a life form, as they would also understand basic physics and chemistry and science, and therefore would also have harmony, the exact same harmony, because those sound waves and harmonies exist in nature without human beings, so that they are quantifiable to any life, any other extraterrestrial life would quantify it, as also we will discover with colors, because we know that colors is unique to not unique to human beings, but also is something that's quantifiable. Therefore, as is language, as is communication, so that extraterrestrial probably would have its own music. They will have their own music. They will have their own ways of putting those those modes together. Now, whether they are in the modes that we understand, we do not know. And that's the beauty of it. It's almost getting it in a a Star Trekky type way, the weird kind of music, or
Go straight down this
I always
portal now.
Yes, I always loved the soundtrack to Clockwork Orange, because it was trying to predict what the music of the future.
I love that.
My favorite one was "I want to marry a lighthouse keeper and keep me in a job all day," which just is such a retro. It's a perfect prediction of what human beings do. Anyway, back to the point. Music exists without us. So, if my theory is correct, that thing that humanizes us. Excuse me, that thing that humanizes us will also be the thing that endears us to alien life forms. War and fighting and nuclear weapons will not. It'll make them fear us, because they will also understand the same laws of physics and know that it's a destructive force. So the thing that's going to save us would be the thing that brings us joy in life, and the thing that's going to destroy us is the thing that brings fire and hate. And so any extraterrestrial will recognize that, and we will be judged as a species, and we will be judged as a race, the human race, on whether we can get to grips with the former, which is our ability to express our connection to nature, or the latter, our ability to destroy it. So
Yes.
this is very basic, but if you don't believe those two things, if you can't get your head around and go, fuck that, who the fuck off, that's where comedians come in and go, no, you're wrong, idiots.
Yeah.
Here we go. Here, let me try and connect you to that deep human emotion that makes you want joy, and the thing that'll, if on a spur of a moment, I always think a man's character is decided at the spur of the moment, the challenge, and I've never really had to face it. But if you see someone drowning in the ocean, do you jump in and save them, or do you stand on the shore and wish you had for the rest of your life? That's kind of what makes you. And I think we're at a point. It always feels like in my life that it's been coming to this. We're at a point in human existence where we have to decide, are we going to try and jump in and save ourselves, or are we just going to stand there and watch ourselves drown? How about, oh my God, that was fucking very profound.
That was beautiful, man.
Put that on
I love it.
Put that
I
on
love
my
it.
grave. Put that, my epitaph. I'll never have to do another podcast again.
Perfect. Done and dusted.
Thanks, guys.
Man.
Thanks for the career.
Yeah. Man, well, look,
anyway, this is an arts podcast, right? So
oh yeah, man! This is whatever comes up, and we're both.
I feel like I should
we
try to
both
be
do what we
funnier.
do, so this is perfect, man. Absolutely. There's no rules really on this. So
I know, but I thought maybe you wanted me on here for like the comedy guy podcast. But like I said, I've never really thought of myself as being that.
I like all of what you are and who you are, and it's perfect, man. It's perfect. And
right.
yeah, I'm going to wrap it up in a minute, but I just wanted to before we do that, just wanted to mention briefly as well. Everybody's talking about Jamie. So you were in that musical. Was that kind of pulled with the lockdowns and stuff, or like, is that going to be coming on again when we're released into the world?
Well, they have just announced that the show is going up on sale again. So I'm not sure the exact date. I looked online. It looks like they're selling tickets from April 1st, although I'm not sure. When I did 2 nights of it in December, and then the lockdown happened again. So we were rehearsed and ready to reopen, but my contract was finished in January. So it'll be on sale. It's a fantastic musical. A true story about a boy called Jamie New, but his real name is Jamie Campbell, who's this boy from the northeast of England who wanted to go to the prom dressed as in a dress, basically, as a drag queen or in a dress. So that's the musical. It's on at the Apollo Theatre, and you definitely go and check it out. It's a pop musical written by Dan Gillespie Sells and Tom McRae, and it's funny, and it's a great night out. Fantastic night out. So
well, I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see you in it, man. I can't wait to see you back on stage in general, and just Yeah, just get
Yeah.
back into the swing of things, you know.
Sure, I play Hugo Battersby, who is like a washed-up drag queen who lives in Sheffield. It's not
How's the accent?
It's not Shylock. What you mean? Like, I'll try. Well, it's been a while since I've done my like Sheffield accent, but it's all right. You know, it's all right. I get away with it. I don't think if you were from Sheffield, you go, where are you from? I go, well, I spent about a couple of years in Toronto. I was in Toronto for a couple of years, Aaron. And I was in Glasgow. I went to uni in Glasgow. So,
Or you just have the best performance of your life, and you come out into the lobby afterwards, and this really angry Sheffield guy is standing there, just confronting you about put all his anger in his life into that moment of he got the accent not exactly perfect the way my granddad did it or whatever.
Yes, but you know the thing that I've learned about British accents, right, is that there are so many different ones that I could easily say, I know I'm from. Oh, where are you from? You're from Parsons Cross. So I'm not from. I'm just outside Parsons Cross in Newbury. And he'll be like, oh, no, actually, Newbury's that's the wrong part of the country. Anyway, but you know, if you move from street to street, in some of these places, the accent changes from street to street. Like, you'll know the difference between a North Dublin accent and a Swords accent, you know? It's the same. It's the same in the UK. So I can easily cover it up by saying, oh, that's how we sound on our street.
Brilliant, man.
That's just how we sound, mate.
I love it, man. So I just wanted to say, it's such a pleasure to talk to you, as always. And such a pleasure to have you on here, and thanks so much for doing it.
Oh my God, well, I'm just so humbled for having you, on your podcast. I mean, it's just really amazing that you could have me. No, actually, well, no, I genuinely mean, I hope it goes really well. I hope people enjoyed this weird transient discussion. You know, I don't really know what people will take away from that, and I can't remember what I said, so that's probably a good thing.
Great talking to Phil on the show. It was lovely to hear some insight into his life and his work and all the rest. So thanks, Phil, for being here. Thanks for doing it. Folks, check out Everybody's Talking About Jamie. Go to see Phil on stage in the West End when that all comes back. Okay, thanks for listening to Resonating with Emmet O'Malley. It's been a pleasure, and I will talk to you next Tuesday.